The challenge. The impact threw Marcus Thorne through the cockpit like a rag doll. One moment he'd been navigating the asteroid field surrounding Caliros. The next, his scavenger ship was screaming toward the planet's red surface. Engines dead, controls fried. He'd managed to trigger the emergency landing protocols before everything went black. He woke in chains. The heat hit him first. Oppressive, dry, choking. Then the noise. Thousands of voices roaring above him in a language he didn't understand, their bloodlust palpable even through the stone walls. Marcus blinked dust from his eyes and found himself in a holding cell beneath what could only be an arena. Through the bars, he could see other prisoners, aliens of species he'd never encountered, all wearing the same hopeless expression. "Fresh meat," a guard barked in broken universal, shoving Marcus forward. "The crowd wants entertainment. You fight, maybe you live another day." Marcus stumbled into the bright sunlight of the crimson Colosseum, temporarily blinded. When his vision cleared, he saw the massive oval arena, packed with thousands of spectators in the stands. The sand beneath his feet was rusty red, stained with what he tried not to think about. They tossed him a dented sword that felt awkward in his hand. He was an engineer, not a warrior. Then she entered from the opposite gate. Even at a distance, Seraph Kane was magnificent and terrifying. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her athletic frame covered in midnight blue skin that seemed to absorb the harsh sunlight. Silver markings traced intricate patterns across her arms, shoulders, and face. Tribal symbols Marcus didn't recognize. Her hair was pure white, pulled back in a warrior's knot, and her eyes were the color of molten amber. She wore minimal armor, a braceplate, bracers, and leather wraps around her legs. She moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had never known defeat. The arena master's voice boomed across the Colosseum, and though he couldn't understand the words, he understood the crowd's excited response. Seraph raised her blade, a wicked curved weapon that looked like an extension of her arm, and pointed it directly at him. Then she spoke, and to his surprise, she used universal. "Human." Her voice was deep, melodious, resonant. "You are far from your homeworld and weak in my eyes. But the crowd thirsts for spectacle, and I am bound by tradition." She pressed her free hand to her chest, where her silver markings converged in a complex symbol. "I invoke the ancient oath of Caliros before these witnesses. Should you best me in combat, I am bound to you by blood and honor. Protector, companion, yours to command." The crowd roared louder, clearly delighted by this turn. Seraph's amber eyes glittered with amusement. "But you won't, little human. You'll die quickly. I promise you that mercy, at least." Marcus gripped his sword tighter, his heart hammering. He didn't want to fight this warrior goddess. He just wanted to go home. But he could see in her eyes and in the guards lining the arena walls that there was only one way out, through her. The gong sounded. Seraph charged, and the battle began. The unexpected victory. Seraph closed the distance between them in seconds, her blade singing through the air in a perfect arc meant to separate Marcus's head from his shoulders. He dropped and rolled, sand exploding where he'd been standing. The crowd's roar intensified. They'd expected blood on the first strike. "Coward," Seraph called, circling him with predatory grace. "Running only delays the inevitable." Marcus kept his distance, his engineer's mind working frantically. He couldn't match her strength or speed, but the arena itself, that was different. His eyes darted across the Colosseum, cataloging everything. The ancient stone pillars scattered across the fighting ground, the chains hanging from platforms, the uneven terrain where sand had been disturbed by countless battles. Seraph lunged again, and this time Marcus barely deflected her strike. The impact sent shockwaves up his arms, nearly knocking the sword from his grip. She was impossibly strong.
But she was also overconfident, telegraphing her attacks, expecting easy victory. He needed to change the terrain. Marcus ran for the nearest pillar, hearing Seraph's laugh behind him. Yes, hide like prey. But he wasn't hiding. As she rounded the pillar, Marcus kicked hard at its base where he'd spotted stress fractures. The ancient stone groaned. Seraph's eyes widened a fraction of a second before the pillar toppled. She dove aside, but it forced her into the deeper sand where movement was slower. For the first time, Marcus pressed his advantage. He used the fallen pillar as cover, forcing her to fight in tight quarters where her reach was limited. When she tried to bull through with pure strength, he used her momentum against her, redirecting rather than blocking. His sword found her shoulder, a shallow cut, but first blood. The crowd's roar changed pitch, confusion mixing with excitement. Seraph's expression hardened. She stopped playing. The fight intensified into a blur of clashing blades. Marcus felt his arms burning, his lungs screaming, but he kept adapting. He grabbed handfuls of sand and threw them at her eyes. He used the chains to create obstacles. He fought dirty because he fought to survive. Then he saw his opening. Seraph had backed him toward one of the elevated platforms, thinking she had him cornered. But Marcus spotted the corroded support beam. One strong impact would bring it down. He let her drive him back, timed his dodge perfectly, and kicked the beam with everything he had. The platform collapsed directly onto Seraph's sword arm. She roared in pain, her weapon flying from her grip. Marcus moved on instinct, scooping up her blade and pressing it to her throat before she could recover. Both of them were gasping, covered in sweat and sand. The Colosseum fell silent. Seraph stared up at him, amber eyes wide with disbelief. Her chest heaved against his forearm where he'd pinned her. For a long moment, neither moved. "Impossible," she breathed. But the arena master's voice boomed across the Colosseum, declaring what everyone had witnessed: the human had won. Seraph's face went through a dozen emotions: shock, fury, humiliation, and something else Marcus couldn't identify. Slowly, she lowered her eyes in the traditional gesture of surrender, pressing her hand over the silver marking on her chest. "The vow is sealed," she said quietly, her voice thick with barely contained rage. "By the blood of my ancestors and the honor of my clan, I am yours, human." The crowd exploded in chaos, some cheering, others protesting. Marcus helped Seraph to her feet, but she jerked away from his touch, her jaw clenched tight. "We need to move," she hissed suddenly, her eyes scanning the arena master's box where guards were conferring urgently. "You've disrupted their betting system, made them look foolish. They'll kill us both rather than let this stand." "What?" "The vow is sacred, but profit is more sacred to them. Run, human, now!" She grabbed his wrist, her grip like iron, and pulled him toward a service gate. Behind them, guards began pouring into the arena, weapons drawn. Their escape had begun, and so had something neither of them had anticipated, a bond that would change both their lives forever.
The reluctant bond. The crimson wastelands of Kaliros stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of rust-colored sand and jagged rock formations beneath twin suns. Marcus's lungs burned as he stumbled over another dune, his body screaming in protest after the fight and their desperate flight through the Colosseum's underground tunnels. Seraph moved ahead of him with infuriating ease, barely winded, despite carrying supplies she'd stolen during their escape. She hadn't spoken a word in hours, and when Marcus had tried, she'd silenced him with a withering glare. "Can we rest?" Marcus gasped, finally stopping at the top of a ridge. Seraph turned, her amber eyes cold. "Rest when you're dead, human. The Council's hunters are half a day behind us at most." "I have a name. It's Marcus." "I don't care." She adjusted the pack on her shoulder. "You are the human who humiliated me before my people, who bound me to servitude through trickery. I didn't trick you. You made that vow yourself." Her hand moved to her blade so fast Marcus flinched. For a tense moment, they stared at each other across the sand. Then Seraph turned away with a disgusted sound and kept walking. "The nearest settlement is 2 days north. Try to keep up."
They traveled in hostile silence as the suns climbed higher, turning the air shimmering and brutal. Marcus discovered that Kaliros had little mercy for off-worlders. The heat was oppressive, the terrain treacherous, and every shadow might hide something deadly. As evening approached, they found shelter in a shallow cave. Seraph built a fire with practiced efficiency, while Marcus collapsed against the stone wall, every muscle aching. "You fought well," Seraph said suddenly, not looking at him. "For a human." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Is that an apology?" "No, it's an observation. You used intelligence instead of strength, adaptation instead of skill. It was unorthodox. On Earth, we call it not dying." The ghost of a smile flickered across her face before vanishing. She pulled out provisions, dried meat and something that looked like purple bread, and tossed half to Marcus. They ate in silence, the firelight playing across Seraph's silver markings. "The vow," Marcus ventured carefully. "Can we talk about it?" Her jaw tightened. "What's to discuss? I invoked the ancient oath. You won. By the laws of my people and the honor of my ancestors, I am bound to you as protector and companion until you release me, or death takes one of us." "I don't want to own anyone, Seraph." "It doesn't matter what you want." She stood abruptly, pacing. "The vow is absolute. It's written in my blood now, a compulsion I can feel in my bones. I couldn't abandon you if I tried. My body would betray me, force me back to your side. Do you understand? You've made me a slave to something I can't control." The anguish in her voice caught Marcus off guard. This wasn't just wounded pride. This was genuine suffering. "Then, help me understand," he said softly. "Explain it to me." Seraph stared into the fire, her shoulders rigid. Finally, she spoke. "The oath binds more than duty. It binds essence. Your safety becomes more important to me than my own. Your desires weigh against my will. Over time, they say the bond can affect even emotions." She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Before Marcus could respond, a sound echoed across the wasteland, the mechanical whine of hoverbikes. Seraph's head snapped up, warrior instincts flaring. "Hunters! They found us faster than I expected." 3 bikes crested the ridge, armed riders in council colors. Seraph drew her blade, positioning herself between Marcus and the threat without conscious thought, the vow compelling her to protect. "Stay behind me," she commanded. But Marcus was already moving, scanning their surroundings with an engineer's eye. The cave, the rocks, the unstable cliff face above the approaching hunters. "Seraph, when I say now, hit that rock formation with everything you've got." "What?" "Trust me." The hunters opened fire. Energy bolts scorched the sand around them. Seraph wanted to charge, to meet them in direct combat, but something in Marcus's voice made her hesitate. "Now!" She struck the indicated rocks with a powerful blow. The cliff face groaned, then collapsed in an avalanche of stone and sand directly into the path of the hunters. 2 bikes went down immediately. The third swerved, giving Marcus time to grab a fallen weapon and disable it with a well-aimed shot to its power core. Silence fell. Seraph stared at the buried hunters, then at Marcus, something like respect flickering in her amber eyes. "You saved us. Both of us. We're in this together whether we like it or not," Marcus said, helping her check that the threat was neutralized. Around the fire that night, the tension between them had shifted. Seraph said closer, her questions about Earth less hostile, more curious. And when exhaustion finally claimed Marcus and he slumped against her shoulder in sleep, she didn't push him away. Instead, she found herself studying his face in the firelight, her hand unconsciously moving to the silver marking over her heart, the mark that now bound them together. "What have you done to me, human?" But the question felt different now, less like an accusation, more like wonder.
Crossing the line. The sandstorm hit without warning. One moment, Marcus and Seraph were navigating a narrow canyon. The next, the sky turned rust red, and howling wind blasted them with stinging sand. Visibility dropped to nothing within seconds. "There!" Seraph shouted over the wind, pointing to a dark opening in the canyon wall. "Ancient ruins! Move!" They stumbled into the shelter together, coughing and brushing sand from their eyes. The structure was old, pre-colonial Kaliran, judging by the architectural style, a chamber carved directly into the rock with surprisingly intact walls. As the storm raged outside, sealing them in with a curtain of red sand, an unexpected intimacy settled over the space. Marcus worked on starting a small fire with their dwindling supplies, while Seraph examined the chamber's ancient murals. The firelight cast dancing shadows across her blue skin, making her silver markings seem to glow. "These tell the story of the first vow," she said quietly, tracing the carved symbols. "Two warriors, enemies from warring clans. One challenged, the other won. The vow bound them, but over time—" She paused, her finger stopping on an image of two figures intertwined. "They fell in love. The vow didn't create it. It just gave them a reason to stay close enough to discover what was already there." Marcus joined her at the wall, standing closer than he normally would. "Is that what your people believe? That the vow reveals something that already exists?" "Some do." Seraph's voice was barely above a whisper. "Others say it's just obligation masquerading as affection, a trick of the mind to make servitude bearable. Which do you believe?" She turned to face him, and suddenly they were inches apart. The amber of her eyes caught the firelight, making them molten and intense. "I don't know anymore. 3 days ago, I would have said the latter, but now—" "Now?" Marcus prompted, his heart racing. "Now I find myself thinking about you when I should be planning our route, watching you sleep instead of keeping proper watch, feeling something twist in my chest when you smile." Her voice turned frustrated, almost angry. "I tell myself it's just the vow, but it feels like more. It feels real, and I hate that I can't tell the difference." "Maybe you're thinking about it wrong. Maybe it doesn't matter whether the vow caused it or revealed it. Maybe what matters is what we do about what we feel." "And what do you feel, human?" The challenge was back in her voice, but underneath it was vulnerability, hope, fear. Marcus reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he traced one of the silver markings along her jaw. Her skin was warm, smooth, and she inhaled sharply at his touch. "I feel like I've never met anyone like you. Strong, fierce, honorable, beautiful." His thumb brushed her cheek. "I feel like that first night when you stayed close, when you asked about Earth and actually listened. I felt something shift, and I don't think a vow can create that." Marcus. His name on her lips sounded different than before, not an accusation, but something tender. "Tell me to stop, and I will," he whispered. Instead, Seraph closed the distance between them. Her kiss was tentative at first, questioning, as if he expected him to vanish like a desert mirage. Marcus responded gently, his hands finding her waist, feeling the power in her frame, the warrior's strength tempered now by something softer. When she deepened the kiss, her hands tangling in his hair, years of loneliness and battle hardness seemed to melt away. They broke apart, both breathing hard. "This is madness," Seraph breathed, but she didn't let go. "Probably," Marcus agreed, trailing kisses along her jaw, down the silver markings on her neck. She made a sound between a gasp and a growl, her fingers tightening on his shoulders. "The vow. Forget the vow," Marcus said firmly. Looking into her eyes, "This isn't about obligation, Seraph. This is about choice. My choice. Your choice." Something in her expression cracked open then, the warrior's mask falling away completely. "I choose you," she whispered. "Vow or no vow, I choose you." Their second kiss was nothing like the first. This one was hunger and need, a dam breaking after too long holding back. Seraph's strength was exhilarating, the way she could lift him effortlessly, press him against the ancient wall with controlled power that promised both protection and passion. Marcus's hands explored the silver markings across her skin, discovering that they were sensitive, making her arch into his touch with sounds that drove him wild. They sank to the floor together, the firelight painting them in amber and shadow. Seraph's armor came away piece by piece, revealing more of her midnight blue skin, more silver patterns that Marcus traced with lips and fingers. His own clothes disappeared under her surprisingly gentle hands, and then there was just skin against skin. Heat,
against heat. "Tell me if I'm too strong," she murmured against his shoulder, vulnerable in a way she'd never been before. "You're perfect," Marcus assured her, pulling her closer. "You're absolutely perfect." The storm raged outside, but inside the ancient ruins, two souls found shelter in each other. Every touch was a question answered, every kiss a wall broken down. Seraph had spent years being the undefeated warrior, never allowed to be soft, never permitted to want. Marcus showed her she could be both, fierce and tender, strong and vulnerable. When they finally lay tangled together afterwards, Seraph's head on his chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin, the silence between them was comfortable, intimate. "I was so angry at you. For winning. For binding me, for making me feel things I didn't want to feel. And now?" She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with those incredible amber eyes. "Now, I'm angry it took me so long to stop fighting it." She kissed him softly. "You've conquered more than the arena champion, Marcus Thorne. You've conquered something I thought was unconquerable." "What's that?" "My heart." Marcus pulled her back down, wrapping his arms around her. Outside, the storm began to quiet, but neither one of them moved. They had found something in each other that neither had been looking for, a connection that transcended vows and obligations, something real and chosen, and theirs. But dawn would bring new challenges. The hunters wouldn't stop. And somewhere in the back of both their minds was the knowledge that this peace was temporary, stolen moments in a world that wanted them dead.